Hello, I'm trying to send an announcement to the other people, and I hope that they're up to speed with what you and I did. And that is going to the previous announcement that had a link to the, yeah, hopefully they did. I'm so sorry. My wife does this for me. And so on the previous one, she had done so. And then of course she's gone, and the time I try to do it on my own, it fails. Um, so yeah, I'm to the people who are not on here and still trying to access it via today's link. I am so sorry. All right. Shoot. All right. So today's we're going backwards, right? I had done North Carolina erroneously ahead of the Southern Colonies. Northern Colonies ahead of the Southern Colonies. So now we're doing in that order. So let me get the names down real quickly. And so remember that when people do this, they tend to generalize. That's a temptation that we're going to try to overcome because they want to fit it into a narrative already into the Civil War, into the North and South, going into incompatible directions. All right. And that's kind of a simplification of things. But nevertheless, you can see a pattern of agriculture versus more diversification, bourgeois North versus more of a gentry class domination in the South. Okay, and so we're going to look into that. But let's see here. So I don't know how many of you have already done this. Does anybody have any comments on number one? Has anybody had a chance to do number one? It's okay if you haven't, or if you're bashful.
Are you talking about the Southern Colonies? I just joined.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can't see good right now. I just came from the optometrist.
Oh, that's okay. And especially if you're driving, be careful.
Yeah, I am driving. I just coming back from the VA.
Oh, good for you. All right. So yeah. Be careful driving. So with number one, anybody want to take a stab at it? If not, it's okay.
Which one was that?
It says capitalism for better and for worse.
I got it right here. I'm trying to remember.
It's all right. So remember, in the beginning of the early modern era, you have the development of the moneyed classes, right? And they're developing from trade primarily, right? From trade and a demand for a variety of goods. And so you have an artisan class, a skilled laborer class, and you also have a merchant class in particular that are jumping into that void during the early modern era.
You still there?
Uh-huh. So at any rate, with the development of these classes, these moneyed classes, right? It's the development of a new merchant and artisan or middle class, okay? And what happens quite often in history is when you have the enrichment of a certain class, it doesn't take long and they began demanding political rights to accompany their economic enrichment, right? It kind of collectively, when they do better for themselves, it kind of collectively enhances their self-esteem, their confidence, so to speak, and they want a concurrent voice in government that goes along with that higher status in society. And so as they did, they began to be heard in Parliament, in the lower house, that is, in the House of Commons. Okay. So with the House of Commons, they began to really make a crack into the power of the monopoly system, right, in England itself,
That's
as
what's going on.
well as stretching out to the North America. And so you have the development of kind of like the Spanish system, whereby they'd say, okay, well, then you guys go ahead and open these joint stock companies on your own. If you could accumulate the capital on your own, and you venture and you risk your own money, go ahead and venture at your own risk, and we'll bless it, right? And so they began. You no longer had to be, oftentimes a lord, had to be the noble, part of the nobility, to be able to do this. And so people who had no money to put in, right, no capital, no money to begin with, what they could do is they become an adventurer. They could go and risk their lives across the Atlantic and try to find some money-making enterprise to double the money that the investors had put into the joint stock company. And in doing so, they would be afforded, however well they did, they'd be treated as if they had put in a certain percentage of funds into the company, when in reality they hadn't put in a penny, right? But they're treated as if they had, because of their contributions to the company. And so Captain John Smith, right, into the Virginia company, he came in and he was very proud of
Are you
himself
back?
as a self-made man. Okay. Anybody have any questions? All right. So if you came in here and you're willing to do so as an adventurer, you could really improve your lot. Then another avenue, if you're very desperate, was by way of being an indentured servant. You would basically enslave yourself from 3 to 7 years. But at the end of that indenture, and let's face it, in some colonies, they had a better reputation than in others for how they treated their indentured servants. For instance, in Maryland, they had a good reputation for how indentured servants were treated. And so you would get your freedman dues at the end of your indenture. You would get a certain allotment of land. You were to have learned a trade, and you were to have been given a certain amount of food, etc. All right, and tools, etc. So, nevertheless, I say, if you had money, if you put in the lion's share of money into a joint stock company, you brought in the lion's share of its profits. Under the headright system, for every indentured servant or slave, every laborer that you brought with you, because we were short on laborers, especially in Virginia, you were granted 50 acres of land as an incentive to bring laborers with you. So imagine if you had 50 to 100 laborers that you could afford to bring with you, and you get 50 acres of land for each of them. You get yourself a vast estate very quickly, right? All right. And so any questions? There was a gentleman named Lord Berkeley, and he was a well-to-do English gentleman, and he he sent letters back to Sussex, which was a land that was agricultural back in England and had a lot of well-to-do gentlemen. But they had primogeniture there. The oldest son got everything from dad. So he targeted the second, third, and fourth sons. And it said, I have a great land for you. Come on over here. And what he did as well is he not only offered them the best land, which was along the coast called the Tidewater. So they were known as the Tidewater elite, who stayed there along the coast in the best land. But also, the governor handpicked his royal council. He would handpick them to be on his royal council. And if they had to bide their time to sit on that council, they were oftentimes elected into the assembly, the lower house of the legislature. So they were the elected gentlemen. And you found that a lot of the poor ex-indentured servants found themselves, if at all, receiving land or not receiving land, moving out to the west into what was called the Piedmont. And so there was a stark contrast, according to the primary sources, between the haves over in the Tidewater region on the coast and the have-nots down deep into the west, into the Piedmont. And the people in the Piedmont contended that they were not represented well at all by the government in the Tidewater. When they needed something done, when they had drama with the Native Americans, there was no help to be had. When elections came, they never received a ballot to vote for anyone on their behalf, much less to have one of their own elected into office to represent them. Right? So we're saying, right, that the mercantilist system from the Middle Ages was eroding. Capitalism was beginning to grow somewhat. Opportunities were growing for the common man in the Southern Colonies, but it still was a rich man's world. So hence capitalism for better and for worse. All right. Number two is typical of what you read in history books now. Okay. It's revisionist history. It's post-civil rights movement history. Is the Englishmen are depicted as untrustworthy, ungrateful, aggressive. Okay. Look at here, there are instructions, even from back in England. Before the natives perceive that you mean to plant permanently among them, build an invulnerable facade, a fort with an invulnerable facade. So before the natives realize that you're not leaving, build an intimidating fort and lock yourself in it. So that is the typical ugly imperialist, right? The natives are not going to want you there. When they realize you're not leaving, they're going to despise you for it. So build an intimidating looking fort and just plant yourself there. Don't go out of your way to offend them, but take care of your own first. So right away, they knew that they were creating, or they knew that they anticipated an environment of distrust with the Native Americans. And they didn't care. They prepared for it. There were about a dozen subjugated tribes to Powhatan, and they went into past two, went into about the third, known as the Posbeheg, and they put up a cross stating that it was theirs and it was their land. And the Posbeheg Sachem, or like sub-chief, was at a loss. He's like, what are they doing? What does this mean? And he reported back to Powhatan, asking Powhatan to wipe them out. Okay. So Powhatan notices or hears that the Posbeheg and another tribe eventually, when the English extort them, they grab them, threaten them with weapons, and demand food. They had enough, and they chase after them, and they chase them back to their boat, and then they fire their cannon, which scares them. Powhatan wants to know about that cannon. So, on a famous case in which John Smith and his men are fishing and hunting, he has them captured through his brother Opechancanough. And they're brought before him, and they believe it was a mock. The anthropologists believe it was a mock thing, that they weren't really going to do it. But they pretended like they were going to beat him and kill him with their clubs. And that's when his young daughter, Pocahontas, pleads for John Smith's life. And he tells him, I want you to be my sub-sachem. I want you to be my eyes and ears on the English and any more that come. And I want you to bring me your weapons. And of course, John Smith lies to him and never brings him the weapons once he's back in safety. And it's one broken promise after another, according to Helen Roundtree in her book. And again, he goes back to extorting when they have the starving time of 1609 to 1610. They're at Jamestown. But notice, right, at any given time, according to her book, Powhatan could have wiped them out. But he chose not to. And he asked them to come in closer from the coast so that he can keep an eye on them. They refused to. He asked them not to move then any further inland as far as encroaching on native territory, and they did. So virtually every promise he asked them to keep or they swore to keep was broken. And so by 1610, they went to war, the first Powhatan War. Powhatan dies in 1622, 12 years later, and Opechancanough was just waiting for his time. Opechancanough thought his brother was a pushover all this time, and the white man was taking advantage of his brother all this time. So as soon as he mourned his brother, Opechancanough opened war on the colonists, and he almost won in the Second Powhatan War in 1622. Then, you know me, I try to do I try to be as broad as possible. So I do a 180. And this is very politically incorrect. This guy's got a lot of guts. David Price in his book. This guy actually praises John Smith and says that John Smith was a great American first hero because he earned his stripes, because he wasn't a nobleman, and because his own practical sagacity, his own wisdom, his own pragmatic mind got the English colonists out of one bind after another, because they were always, their back was always against the wall, outnumbered so greatly by the Native American Confederacy. And I'll let you read that. Number 4. Yeah, I was kind of sweating this one, writing this one out too. Slavery was simply an economic, not a racist decision for African slaves. And you probably know that I'm going to do a 180 on number 5. Okay. And you could probably guess the type of data I'm going to use. So for one, right, I'm going to make the argument that alternative labor became not only uneconomical, but unreliable. Okay, Native Americans, Las Casas won a famous debate in Spain, and Christian Europe decided that it was unethical and unchristian to enslave the Native Americans. And the British decided that it was too costly in war, that we wanted to try to make peace with the Native Americans. And that was the last thing that would ensure peace, was trying to enslave them. And then indentured servants. I make a big deal out of Bacon's Rebellion of 1676. And I get this from Howard Zinn's book. Supposedly, a lot of them were furious that they did not get their freedom dues that were promised them. So they rose up in rebellion against the governor, chased him out of the colonies into the Caribbean, and declared a people's republic. And then they're eventually defeated. But supposedly the legislator and the governor, after the failure of Bacon's Rebellion, stated that indentured servants were too combustible. They were too explosive. Because you think about it, right? People working 3 to 7 years. I liken it to someone who's working a menial job today, but they're taking night classes at a university. Their expectations are high. They're not expected to stay there at that menial job, right? Their expectations are high. And sadly, we have evidence that poor slaves, when they came and landed, they were broken from the beginning when they landed here on the shore. They were more broken. They were sadly more docile. Then, through a combination of the rise of empires and the fall of empire. Somehow simultaneously both worked. Don't ask me how. But one, for instance, was like the fall of Dahomey, created incursions into Dahomey and a large increase of prisoners of war that were sold off as captives. But then you had the rise of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the empire. You had the rise of another empire, and they brought forth a large number of slaves to Elmina and Luanda and the main slave depots on the Ivory Coast. And they brought them to the Caribbean. Bacon's Rebellion was 1676. They decided in Virginia that they wanted to opt for African slaves. Right after that, around 1680. Around 1680,
Continue on
Jamaica and
Nunhouse Parkway.
Barbados declared that they had a surplus of slaves. I kid you not, right about that same time. So then when you have, sadly, as a commodity, you have a surplus of products, the price of them goes down. And according to the sources, it became just about as cheap to buy a slave for life and then have that slave's, according to the new slave codes, that slave's children and the slave's children's children, just about as cheaply to buy them as it was to buy an indentured servant for only 3 to 7 years. So it became economical to buy a slave, sadly. And then in South Carolina, word got out that the slaves, before knowledge of the sickle cell trait, word got out that the slaves were doing very well. It had already gotten out in the British Caribbean that they were doing well with sugar, out in sugar, and not getting malaria. But word got out that they were doing well in the rice fields and not growing ill. Wait, this is African American Agency. Now, this is an old one, dang it. I'm going to see if this is the one I have for you, because I have a newer one that has one on slavery, on racism. Let me see if I'm able to open it. This should be the one that you have. Sorry. Right here, racism was inherited as an integral part to English colonization. So you have Aristotle, you have Arabic writers, you have Portuguese writers who wrote racist depictions of African people. Some of them were environmental, saying because of the tropical weather, which caused these defects, if you will. And others were claiming that it was just innate, that it was just, they were born with them. I'm not going to get into them. You could read them. They're demeaning and they just embarrass me. But you have, right, Virginia legislator John Pori chose to translate Leo Africanus's racist work when the slaves had just arrived. So you have evidence of some of the legislators in Virginia and other places in the South write this stuff up and try to like spread it in the colonies. And then you had cases. 1630, a white man in Virginia named Hugh Davis was publicly whipped for abusing himself to the dishonor of God and the shame of Christians by defiling his body and lying with a Negro woman. Okay. Then here, it was there in the South where Antonio the Negro Johnson had his dream squashed by a discriminatory edict established by the Virginia House of Burgesses, that's the assembly. He had acquired over 250 acres of farmland as a Virginia indentured servant turned planter, and upon returning from business in Maryland, he was astonished to see his property confiscated by the Commonwealth of Virginia because it seemed not proper for a man of his skin color to own land and servants. So he had his property confiscated simply because of the color of his skin. All right. And then you have a couple cases of alleged rape in Massachusetts Bay Colony. One was white and one was black. The black man, Arthur, was hanged. The white man, Daniel Fairfield, was not. And then basically on number 6, African-American agency in South Carolina. African-American slaves in early South Carolina, they discovered in times when their demand for their labor was acutely needed, they made demands. They made demands and they received money and in some cases, freedom. Okay, what were some of the demands? For one, like the football team, there were, you look at the newspapers of that time in the colonial time period, and I kid you not, they had a major problem with panthers killing children and the elderly. And so they very reluctantly gave guns to their slaves to hunt them down. And the other one that got that was very common that I remember reading from that book was tar and pitch. The white man didn't want to do it. It was very uncomfortable. Just was not pleasant work. Supposedly you would cut a V in a certain type of tree, and you would have the sap go into a vat, and then you would have to heat that sap to a very high temperature and add things to it, and you would get it all over your clothes and all over your hands, etc., and to make that tar and pitch. And it would, it was used as an adhesive for ships with the wood. And so, but like I said, they would figure out just how badly and desperately this labor was needed, and they would say, well, okay, fine, what's in it for me? And they made demands, and they received, like I said, money, and in some cases even freedom for this window of time. And Native Americans, the Natchez in particular, bullied the French in the lower Mississippi. The French just didn't have enough resources. The French got along really well compared to the English with a lot of the Native American tribes along the rest of the Mississippi, but the Natchez had their way with them. And it just kind of shows in this book the agency of Native Americans, that the ball was in their court sometimes. And that's all you need to remember for the test. And then number 8, all right, is you need to remember to get it right on the test, is just remember that title is French Louisiana became fluid by accident, not design. All right. And you'll get it right. Is the French leaders were before the French Revolution, Ancien regime, right? They were before the French Revolution. And so they were all for keeping the nobility, having monopolies, having only the proper people rule, and keeping everyone in his or her proper place. But they just didn't have enough soldiers, enough political leaders, enough resources, etc. So when they came here, they didn't have enough resources, and so they had to begrudgingly allow people to become artisans to make things without the proper papers, and to become smugglers, to trade in things, even to the point of allowing piracy. Such was their at some points. Such was their desperation for goods in French Louisiana. They weren't happy about it, trust me, but they almost had to. Right? Some of the political positions they gave to those who came from French fathers and Native American mothers, and they were scornful about that. They were not happy about that at all. But a lot of the French men did not have French wives that they brought over with them. All right. And so people tended to marry whom they chose, do what they wanted economically, kind of rise up in political positions that if they were back in France, no way. And so hence Louisiana became fluid, but by accident, not by design. Okay. And that's it, you guys. All right. Yes.
I have some questions about the test. Like, I was just wondering if there was like a study guide, and also like when we can take it, and like just what it will be like.
You know what? I'll do you one better, Clara. I will post as a file. I'll post as a file the test itself and let you look at test 1. Okay, hon?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll do that. I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So you guys have a good week. Okay.
You too, Professor.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Oh, hello. I was
Have a
wondering if
good
you
one.
got my name down for the meeting.
I'm sorry?
I was wondering if you got my name down for the meeting. I came in a little bit late.
Maybe not. What's your name?
Julian.
No, matter of fact, I haven't, Julian. What's your name? Julian.
Ochoa.
Ochoa. All
Oh,
right, you
yeah, I also-
do now.
I also
How about-
have one more question. I have an EOPS progress report coming up that it's due on the 12th, but I don't have any assignments graded. Should I just put NA or are you gonna grade some soon?
I'm trying. You know what? I'm about 35 to 40 into the first assignment. It's gonna take me a while.
Oh, it's okay. I can just
you
put
guys
it
are
in
a huge
NA. I don't
class.
wanna
I have
rush
like
you, right?
80 something of you.
I can put it as like NA or something. I don't want to rush you.
Yeah, but no, yeah, know that I'm currently on your class right now.
Okay. So should I
Alright.
wait or should I just put it like NA, like there's no grade yet?
I probably would NA, and that'll be meeting me halfway. If you put NA and know that I'm literally I'm doing your class assignments right now.
Okay.
All right, thank you and sorry.
It's okay. Okay. Have a good day.
All right, you as well.
Professor, I got in like 8, 9 minutes late. You got me, Robert Rodriguez. I couldn't get in. I was on the road. I was trying.
No, shoot, I don't actually.
The old dude, the old vet.
You got it. I got you now.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, sir.
All right, have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye, Clara. It won't let me close out. Here's a second.